Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel on YouTube is Discerning What is True. And what I wanted to do today is to share some information for you out there. What really happened after we became a country here in America? It seems as though, uh, what was the quote? If you can, I'm trying to remember the quote. You want to continue to have freedom. This is my summation of the freedom. If you want to still have freedom, you have to stand for it based upon the early founding fathers. Now, so what takes place here is a major thing, inroad that starts taking place is Horace Mann. Horace Mann is the father of public education here in America. But I wonder if he got those ideas. And what I mean by that simply is that he has already begun to get involved in what we call idea simply is that the government should be involved with public education. The key is simply is that before this all it was basically what we called private education, and I've done this before on that, so I don't want to go into that area. But I wanted to share something from this particular book here. This is Lincoln's Marxist, okay, and already we're seeing what I call a utopian type of perspective. In other words, the ideas that are already beginning to begin to be planted. And we know also later on, after the unsuccessful uh, trying to overtake most of European countries of the Marxist socialists, they all failed to bring down the governments in those countries. And they were either arrested and put in jail, or either they flee for their lives. And some left. A lot of them actually left and came to America, but they went through a lot of times through Switzerland. And what took place here, we have to understand simply is that they brought their ideas here. So there's another issue that goes on here. I'd like to explain is that ideas have consequences, folks. They do. Good ideas or bad ideas, they have consequences. And you're already beginning to see what I would call a few rotten apples are beginning to have effect upon our country. So let me read something here from what I would call Lincoln's Marxist. This is an excellent book by Al Benson Jr. and Walter Donald Kennedy. These guys are trying to trace the past and how we've been somewhat deceived. So let me read this to you, okay? So you have an idea what's going on. Long before Karl Marx became known as a leader in the socialist movement, numerous Americans had already joined in the effort to usher in a perfect or utopian ideas or society. As as has already been explained, the very first European settlers in both Virginia and Massachusetts established what we call uh, communistic settlements. In other words, they were together, and maybe you could say communal also, but communistic type of societies. They were all dependent upon one another. There's nothing wrong with that in that pure sense. But what's happened simply is that this is a gradualism, as I talk about. Again, the water is actually clear until it gets muddy. Okay, so this is the muddying of the water. It soon became obvious that the theory of collectivist society and the reality of collectivist society are not the same. Yet the dream persisted of establishing a utopian society in which man would create a perfect world where there would be no war, no crimes, no administration of justice, no government. Besides, there would be neither disease, anguish, melancholy, nor resentment. Every man will seek with infinite ardent the good of all. The 18th century socialist philosophers taught that man's intelligence and reason could be applied to every problem and thereby create a harmonious society or a virtual heaven on earth. So this would eventually oppose the Orthodox Christianity perspective, which I don't agree with neither. So, but the Orthodox Christian perspective was based upon the Puritans, but the Puritans had their problems too. Most are not aware of what really became of the Puritans. They became very controlling in their own societies. So you're seeing not what we call a harmonious group of people already. So why is this important? Well, it lays groundwork eventually for Lincoln, who is not a what we would call a he ran on the Republican Party, which would be what we call would definitely be meaning towards the Republic, and Democrat Party would be called a perspective of what we call democracy. And the key that most people are unaware of is that Lincoln ran. He'd already been unsuccessful in many elections before this. He is a lawyer, so there's a red flag. Okay. We have almost all politicians in our government and our lawyers. They are foreign emissaries, I should say, out there that are actually not beholding to their country here. They don't even, some of them don't even realize what they're doing. So what we do is to understand is that with four different four candidates for for the 1860 election, three of them were not Lincoln, that is. So you had four total. And what transpired was that they divided the country. That's what they did. It was basically what I would call dividing the country in sections. And Lincoln won out of the four candidates. You'll find that that's a true history of someone wants to get somebody in before they've changed the way of now actually stealing elections through the computerized way of doing it. They would simply bring in a particular other candidates to run against others, so they would split the votes. So this was done the first time, as far as I know of, with Lincoln. The second time was with Woodrow Wilson. And the third time, I think, is with Bill Clinton, who eventually was three-party with Perot, Bush, and Clinton running. And basically, Perot was split up Bush's vote. And what happened? I believe he was used as a tool. I really do. That Ross Perot sounded really good, but he was pretty much a millionaire, or a billionaire, maybe I should say, at that time, because he was actually doing a lot of work with computers and such programming. But anyway, the point I'm trying to convey here is that that's how elections are stolen in the olden days. But now they can be stolen. They don't have to be. They can just be stolen by someone going in and hacking into the system. People are unaware of that. It's ridiculous. But we're not go there. So who had the effect? In other words, who was the one who had enormous effect upon Horace Mann? That is, who was the person who had that part? Well, the person would be, and I'm going to share you a little bit here as I go to my share screen. And that lady has an effect. And we'll see that the idea is already beginning to take place. So here we go. Let me share this with you. So this is a little short snippet of a daughter of 19th century Massachusetts, Mary Tyler Peabody Mann, born in 1806, was exposed to the transcendentalist view of the importance of the plant world. She was educated at the school her mother went to. Eliza Palmer Peabody she ran away from school. She taught her botany. Anyway, the point simply is she's influenced by certain people. Nathaniel Hawthorne is also involved in this. We're not really hearing the real story here about who these people are. Again, these are people who are transcendentalists that are actually trying to create a utopia here in America. Okay, all right. And eventually, she has the enormous impact. Her sister, Sophia, was an artist who married diplomat and novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne. And then Mary married the pioneer of universal public education in America, Horace Mann, in 1842. So Mary had an enormous involvement with Horace Mann and the pushing of the ideas. Also, even I was amazed that even Henry David Thoreau was also involved in this. We get the idea that even Henry David Thoreau is somewhat of with his perspective that he's wanting to be truly free. But I wonder simply is what was his motive in doing this? And so, so with Horace Mann out there, meaning simply is that he proposed what we call public education. But what I'm trying to explain to you is the whole makeup is this whole thing is gradually moving along with what I would call their. I don't know if it's been manipulated this way or if it's quote unquote been done this way, but people have these utopian ideas. It just continues on in our lives in so many ways. And what I mean by that simply is we have that idea still proposed. We have that with other authors, Russian authors proposing utopian type of ideas, such and such. Well, if you want to live such and such place, such and such. So we also know that when these guys worked out such and such, were involved in this, that they were involved also heavily. Well, let me explain that. These guys were going to push their ideas, and they chose to open up, buy some land. So I was looking in this particular deal here with also, and I'll just run this little bit of video for you so you'll see this. So let me share the video again, the screen, I should say, and share this with you. Let's see. Back over. So it's called the Brook Farm History. So this is, I'm going to run this video. It's not going to be any noise at all. So here we go, which is Nathaniel Hawthorne and others here. And you'll see there's certain people, philosophies that are buying into. It was a utopian experiment in communal living in the 1840s in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. So this is 9 miles from Boston. It failed, but it had never been attempted. That is, the transcendentalists would have always wondered if a utopia was within each easy reach. This social experiment became famous largely because 3 members later enjoyed fame and influence. That would be Hawthorne, Curtis, and Dana. And anyway, Brook Farm began in 1841. George Ripley and his wife Sophia were founders, helped by 15 others. Ripley was a former Unitarian minister. His goals were individual freedom and humane relations. Sounds like good ideas, you see. This is how people get strung out. So anyway, they bought the property for $10,500. To me, that's a lot of money, because I think it's over $60 an acre, based upon 170 acres. So I think I did that yesterday, looking at this whole thing. It eventually declined. People leaving. Apparently, there was it just kind of fell apart. So anyway, let me just show you this little video here so to give you an idea of what's going on. So this is just to give you some history about it. Some of these guys, I wonder if they came from a background of what I would call, were they against what we call free enterprise? Possibly already, yes. Okay. So it was abandoned eventually. And they actually have saved it, apparently. Bought some acres, such and such. So it's a historical site now. And again, you see this eventually will take place. You see this gradually. And it's all, the interesting thing is simply it's always up in the north. It's not in the south. The south is completely different perspective. So this is what you're seeing, and this is what I try to point out. The difference between these, actually it seems like 2 different countries, was to do with the North had what I would call an enormous influence, especially from the Germans eventually later on, which is what this book was speaking about, Linked with Marxists. the Germans that moved in the South were actually an earlier time, actually in the early 1800s compared to the later on in the 1840s and 50s and 60s. And they brought their ideas here, you see. So you'll see this guy here. They take their ideas based upon Charles Fourier ideas. So he's, Brooks Palm was an association. The word communist and socialist were not used. Yes, I would agree with that. That would make sense. But the key is simply is he was an early socialist, and he died in 1837. So his ideas are already beginning to make inroads with people. Okay, so this is how philosophy itself can have implants with people. Okay, and this idea continues on because there are different communities that do this. Yep, there are some that have done it up in New York. There's some in Indiana. There's some that have done it in Illinois. But there's nothing here in the South that actually has that. And again, it has to be the mix, the thinking of either Poles, Scandinavians, Germans, probably French were there also. Whoever else came from Eastern Europe also were involved. While the South was basically a very different world, meaning that there was just basically English here. You had the slaves that came here. You did have slaves also in the North. Don't ever let people tell you that's not. That's true, very much so. There was a lot of hypocrisy upon these people. They looked at the South as being bad in that perspective, but yet the North had them also. Let's just get real, folks. And the Scotch-Irish who first came to Pennsylvania earlier eventually moved to the South and settled in parts of North Carolina and South Carolina. Mainly these were what we call farmers. And the Germans would have what we call here in South Carolina, what we call certain land set aside for them to create a town. And so those towns were Williamsburg, Orangeburg, Bamberg. I'm trying to think of any other ones. Williamsburg. There's probably 4 or 5 of them. And these was basically settled by the governor of South Carolina to allow them to set up their own cities or towns, such and such. So most people are unaware of that. And I'm just pointing out simply is that ideas have consequences. They really do. So again, this was just, you can see this whole idea of just hoping that something would succeed. It didn't work out. And it's kind of sad. And there were actually a couple who were eventually would be involved in the war. So just give me an idea of that. So let me get back to this here as I share that. And the point simply I'm trying to share with you is simply is how these ideas have enormous impact upon others. And it has never stopped, you see. There's still that whole idea of, want to have this particular idea. So this is what's transpired. My point simply is, again, ideas have consequences. And what is taking place here today is similar to the same things, except that the idea now is simply is that no one's going to own anything. Everyone's going to be in enormous slavery, is what they're proposing. And it's going to be one happy world, and it's going to be a utopian deal. So you won't see, this is the whole idea. You're not supposed to own anything. See, that's a poo-poo. That's a bad thing, you see. That's what Marxists and communists do. They propose that you shouldn't own anything because you're, but they claim that you're basically a good person, but yet your goods and material things are bad. So that's that whole idea of good and bad, black and white. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you. Again, I appreciate your listening, and you have a good day. Take care.